All right, this is gonna be a really cool video because there is one thing that you can do. It's a very simple thing that will drastically improve your landscape paintings. And the cool thing is it really has nothing to even do with painting. So the thing is to choose one part of the landscape and just make it really big. You're probably like, wait, what? Let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's start with some examples from a master landscape painter in Edgar Payne. All right, so in this landscape, you can see that he has made the mountains take up a majority of the painting. You know, the town and the houses are really, really small down here. The trees are really, really small. The sky doesn't take up much space. The majority of the painting are these mountains. And making these houses really small and these trees really small and these mountains really tall and just having this general perspective makes these mountains seem very big and grand. You know, this painting is saying one simple thing. Look at how big and grand these mountains are. All right, here's another Edgar Payne painting. You can see how much of this white water and shadow is taking up in the painting. It is more than anything else. It is more than the white water. It's more than this really cool looking aqua water. It's more than the sky. It's more than the distant ocean. It's even more than these rocks. And having so much of this water in shadow makes it so that when this water does hit the light, it has that much more of an effect. All right, and one more Edgar Payne painting, and you can see that the biggest shape in this is this big cliff in the foreground. You know, you got this smaller cliff on the side here. You got this distant cliff, and then kind of the rest of the background falls into one shape. And the little thing I like to do is put little marks halfway on each side of the canvas. So you can see the cliff on this side goes all the way up and takes up this whole side, and then horizontally it goes past halfway all the way to here. And since this cliff is this big, it is really making a statement of how tall and warm these rocks are. And the fact that this is put in so big and taking so much space is making it seem very tall, very big, and very powerful. So in my own work, I try to follow this idea of making one element bigger than the rest. Take a look at this painting I did. You know, this was the scene I was seeing. You know, I had all this sky, all this grass, these tall trees, but I specifically chose to put the horizon line towards the top of the canvas and have a majority of the painting be taken up by all this grass. Now here's another painting I did. And again, this was the view I was seeing. And you know, you can see all this sky, all this mountain, you know, all of this of the lake. But I wanted to specifically emphasize these mountains and how big they seem to me and how tall. And so I purposefully made the lake smaller and made the mountains take up way more space on the canvas. I also purposely put in this little person here just to give you a scale reference for how tall these mountains and trees were. Last example is this painting of a waterfall I did. I actually have a whole video on the process of painting this painting. If you want to check that out, I'll put a link to it above right now. But you can see in the photo, you know, the waterfall is this tall, the river is pretty much the same length, the trees are really tall, and I specifically made the river the biggest part. So it's taking up the most space vertically and horizontally, taking up the most space. And you got the mountain is definitely shorter. The trees, even though tall, are still not as big as this whole river. All right, quick side note. If you struggle with color mixing, I'm not gonna go over it in this video because I actually offer the color mixing video from my Foundations of Oil Painting course for free. If you wanna check that out, I have a link to it in the description of this video. Now, what I see happen a lot with beginners is that they have a scene and there's a lot of cool elements in the scene. You know, the sky might be cool, the mountain is cool, the lake is cool, the barn, and they try and fit everything in it as much as they can, and everything ends up being similar in size, so not one element is emphasized. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Here's a photo I took at Jenny Lake in Jackson Hole, and the main elements of this scene are the mountains, this piece of land in the foreground, the sky, and the lake. So to illustrate what I'm talking about, I painted this small little thumbnail study to show you. In it, I purposely made everything similar in size. You can see this land in the front is this general shape, the mountains in the back, around there, got the lake. And so everything from the sky to the mountains to the land to the lake are pretty much taking up the same amount of space. And here I did 3 different examples. You know, we have this one that I just showed you where everything's equal in space. And then I have this one where I emphasized the lake a lot and really worked these shadows and just had the lake take up the most space. And in this one, I had the mountains take up the most space. I really want to emphasize how tall and big these mountains are. So I made that really big. I mean, you can see easily how far in this land goes compared to how far in the mountains are. You know, they're a lot taller than the water, and they're just taking up a whole lot more space. And it's good to do these small studies beforehand, you know, these quick 20-30 minute studies before you do a larger one. That's what I did here. And then I chose the one to emphasize the mountains to paint larger for a Patreon tutorial. And so when I was painting it, knowing that these mountains are taking up the most space, I really wanted to emphasize the atmosphere between that land in the front and the mountains in the back. So I made sure to create a lot of atmospheric perspective by desaturating the color in the back, making the values closer together, softening a lot of edges. And the thing is that all those choices, even though those are color choices, value choices, and edge choices, they all derived from this initial idea that I had at the beginning. If I had chosen the composition that emphasized the lake more, I might not have done that. So what I'm trying to say is that I feel like this is a very good first step when composing a landscape. You know, there's a whole lot more to know with composition, but I always feel like this is a good place to start. Like if you're looking at a scene, you're like, oh, I want to paint this, just first decide which element am I going to have take up the most on the page, and do some thumbnail sketches. Like I do so many thumbnail sketches. And especially when I'm out plein air painting, utilizing this strategy of choosing one element, making it bigger, makes it a lot easier and quicker for me to sketch out a composition and get painting. For example, I was out painting on the beach here, and there were these big clouds overhead and they were really interesting, but I thought that this tide pool was more interesting. And so I specifically did my thumbnails to emphasize this tide pool more, because that's what I was feeling when I was there. That's when I was actually there in person, that's what was catching my attention. If I had just seen a photograph of this, I probably wouldn't have decided to compose the scene that way. This is why I suggest, even if you're just taking photos and you're not actually painting, take mental note or verbal notes on a video of what you're seeing in person and what's having an effect on you, because that will help you make this decision of what part of the landscape to emphasize. Another cool thing is that if you do this, I feel like it makes it a lot easier to get a better composition, because you're already starting with dynamic shapes. If something is really big and the other shapes are smaller, that's very dynamic and that's going to be very interesting. All right, so next time you paint a landscape, what are you going to do? You're going to choose one element and make it bigger than the rest. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.